All right, graph sinusoidal functions. So this is using the last 6 assignments and using all that knowledge we've gained to actually build a graph out of it. So there's 3 different numbers that we have to look at, and then sine and cosine. So right now we're at sine, and sine always starts, the graph starts in the middle on the y-axis. So this is a sine graph. A cosine graph, for example, would be that. The top of our graph or the bottom of our graph is on the y-axis. All right? So a sine graph has the middle of our graph on the y-axis. So we have that. So that's the first thing you want to look at is we have a sine or cosine. It's going to default to sine, so whenever we have sine, it's already correct. At least that part is. Then the second thing I want to look at is my number in the backside, plus 7. That's where the midline of our graph will go. So I move this number to plus 7. The next thing I look at is my my amplitude. How tall is my graph, and is it positive or negative? If it's negative, it means it's going down for sine. So remember, this is a regular sine graph, so it's going up here. So negative means we're going down. And the amplitude is 1. So we need to go from 7 down to 6. Then go back up to 7. And our max is 8. So our amplitude set. Our last number we have to consider is pi over 8. That is our period. So to find our period, zoom out. So we always start with 2 pi. And we divide by that number that is in front of our x, which is pi over 8. So we do pi over 8. I'm going to make my top number 2 pi over 1, because it's a fraction. Then we have this, we can take our bottom fraction, flip it, and multiply. So times 8 over pi. And when you're here, we can cross off our pi's. We get 2 times 8 is equal to 16 over 1. Or 16. So our period is 16. That's a big number. That means that from here to here to here is 16. All right. Well, that means that from here to here should be at 8, and we're not there right now. So we need to move this number over to the point to where half of our graph is at 8. So we're there. Or the better way to do it is because we only have control over a quarter of our graph. I come back to our period, which is 16, and take that number and divide it by 4, because we have control over 1/4 of our graph. So we get 4 again, which means that I'm going to move this number, this plot, out to number 4. And we're done. Okay, next question. So we have a sine graph again. So we are already defaulted to the right answer because our middle is on the y-axis. So we don't have to change that. So that's the first thing. The next thing is I want to move my graph to my midline, which is positive 2. So up to 2. And then I look at my amplitude, which is negative 3. So my graph needs to go down first. It needs to go down 3 units. So 1, 2, 3 units. And then goes back up, so from 2 plus 3 is 5, and that's also accurate. And the last thing I need to look at is my pi over 2. So I'm going to divide 2 pi by pi over 2. And I'm going to make this 2 pi over 1. Once you can take this, flip it, and multiply. Pi is crossed off. 2 times 2 is 4. So our period is 4. 1/4 of our period would equal 1. So I'm going to move this point out to spot 1, unit 1. And that should be our graph right there. We can go back through and look at everything. We should have a midline at 2. That's correct. Should be going down first because the negative sign down 3. And we have a period of 1. So if we go from here, sorry, not period of 1, period of 4. So we go from here all the way to our other midpoint over here is at 4, and that's correct. Question 3. should be a cosine question. It is. So right away, I'm going to flip my graph. So now I have a peak on the y-axis. I'm going to move this out randomly. All right, now we're going to start at our midline. Midline's at -4. So this is our midline point. So this needs to go down to -4. And then we're working on this guy. This guy needs to go -5. Okay, so we have -4, and our amplitude is 5. So that means that our graph goes from -4 up to 1, and -4 down to -9, which is correct. But we have a negative number, which means our graph needs to be flipped. So our graph is like this. It starts at the bottom, and it goes up. And it goes up 5 to -4, which is our midline. Now the last thing we need to do is figure out our period. So we have 2 pi divided by pi over 16. All right, so once again, make this into a fraction. Flip and multiply. We get 32. And once again, we want to take a quarter of this, because we only can control over a quarter of it, which we get 8. So this point should be moved out to 8. And we can't really see, so this is a really spread out graph, so we only see a small portion of our graph here, well, about a quarter, or I guess well actually a half if you consider from here all the way to here is half our graph. But we can't even see the full period. So we can't check this number, make sure that it does go out to 32, but 32 divided by 4 is 8, and this should be accurate. And we are. Last question, probably another cosine question, but we'll see. No, it's a sine question, so it should be defaulted to the right answer. We also have an amplitude of 1, which is nice. It's just going to be up and down 1. Our midline is at 8, so move this to 8. And then we're going up and down 1, but it's positive, so we go up first. Last thing to check is our period, so 2 pi divided by 1/2. And that piece is a fraction. We make this into a fraction, flip and multiply. Okay, so now we don't divide our pi's out. So don't freak out. So 2 pi times 2 is 4 pi over 1. So then we're going to divide this by 4, so we figure out what 1/4 of our sine wave is, and we just get pi. Well, when we have pi in our answer here, you will have pi as an option on your x-axis, which we do here. So we're moving this unit out to pi, which we are there, actually, coincidentally. So our graph should be done. And we're done.